I'm here with Alessandro Pereno at All Things Open 2023. He's from SurrealDB, and we're here learning about all types of trends in open source, and of course, always talking about productivity. So, very nice to see you, Alessandro. Maybe you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, your relationship with Surreal, and we can talk a little bit about what this product is doing and how it all might relate back to productivity.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting. My first All Things Open, and just being part of this open source community is a new thing for me. I come from a background of working for Fortune 500s and Snowflake computing, so SaaS and databases is really where I'm excited to figure out how open source kind of merges there. So that's what I'm hoping to learn. But a little bit about Surreal and my role. SurrealDB wowed me when I saw them present, and I saw them as basically architecturally Snowflake computing, but for transaction workloads. And they basically have that whole separation of compute from storage, but it gets more exciting because they're not concentrating on building the newest version of sliced bread. They've actually built a really comprehensive SQL layer that can do a lot of multi-model things. So you can do graph database alongside a transactional database, alongside a NoSQL database, and completely abstracted. So very excited about that.
That's super cool. Now, I come from a long time ago, doing work around PL SQL, and back in the day when you would do really clever things like wrapping Perl scripts around SQL queries and things like that, which was, of course, not problematic in any way and didn't cause any type of toil or frustration or anything like that. Tell me how some of these things, and I don't know if you would consider them sugar or if you would consider them maybe part of the framework, but tell me a little bit more, living in what we know about all the hangups of a distributed transaction type of database world. What is it that Surreal is offering that reduces some of that toil on the data engineer, on the developer, on the person who's creating applications with this technology?
Excellent question. So it depends on where you are and what stack you're doing, but generally speaking, databases, as if you're an end developer, is the thing that you just have to deal with as a necessary evil of talking to a DBA if it's some more traditional, or you have a document store that you spun up. Now someone's pain is going to be figure out how to take that document store and somehow sync it back to the mothership or some warehouse lake. You figure it out. Now, the problem with a lot of these technologies is unless you're building the most low latency, super hyper competitive, real need for a NoSQL environment, most of these things can be done by a whole lot of different technologies. And then someone's going to come, this is the best one. But now they have the problem of maintaining 20 different database layers. And I think that's the biggest problem in the ecosystem as we move forward, orchestrating the multiple different use cases for transaction.
So give me maybe like a concrete example of one of those. So let's say that, again, let's draw on maybe some more legacy tech. We're using a JDBC, we're wrapping a transaction in a Java Enterprise Edition kind of style. Like we're opening the transaction, we are running our workload, we are dealing with our contingency, our rollback. Just that alone, I mean, a write and then understanding everything that we might have to deal with from an exception handling standpoint. We could be talking about, a couple of hours of development really to get that right. What's that experience like when you're dealing with Surreal?
Or we could also talk about the nightmare of microservices gone awry, right?
Sure.
It's the same exact modality. You have a team that had to deliver something. They delivered a wonderful point solution that returns hello world. And now they have the problem of how do I orchestrate that across all the 50 other microservices, which is the service layer, but they're all talking to independent database layers that are literally probably in memory or God forbid, somehow attached to a Docker or a Kubernetes instance. And now we have conflicts. I mean, I remember we had hash collisions in one of these situations. So the reality is you really want an ACID compliant database to make sure your transactions are consistent across the board. If you can have a database technology that kind of scales to the micro as well as the macro, that's where I'm pretty confident that Snowflake's going to be delivering a new value prop.
Interesting. All right. So tell us that I mean, who is the person who stands to really benefit from from kind of making this transaction. And I realize when you're dealing with something that's going to be as heavily utilized as a persistent solution like this, you might be talking about multiple layers
Yeah.
of the organization. But what are the effects? What should I expect to feel when I have? Because I imagine you're seeing, this isn't as a pattern, right? I mean, transaction and distributed data is not a new pattern. So you're probably seeing a lot of people who are seeing the benefits to your solution and then saying, okay, well, I want to adapt, whatever federated system that I have over to use this new technology. What's next? What should people expect when this is running at scale in the organization?
So I'll take this from an anecdotal perspective. So imagine a world where, I'm pretty sure everyone's lived through one of these scenarios where you have your transactional world, you have your warehouse world, and then you have your data scientists of the world who in theory want to go against the data warehouse, but it's not responsive enough or whatever. So then they go back to the dev team and go, hey, can you also stream this data to this other random thing over here, which is connected to fill in the blank, my Python scripts, my whatever, and then that has to go back to being somehow production into the warehouse so then it can be part of the BI platform. You get my point. So the fact that we have all these stacks and also all these user requests, which fundamentally has to go through this strangled dev team to deliver a product and get a roadmap out, um, something's got to break. Or you give everyone admin access to the underlying technologies, and then, well, something definitely will break. And I think that's a bigger problem.
Interesting. Okay. So now let's pivot a little bit. We were talking before the interview about the choice to use Rust as the programming language of choice behind the project. A couple of questions. First of all, is it pure Rust, or do you have it mixed with some other languages?
Version 1 is pure Rust.
Okay.
Our technical founder originally built the first iteration in Golang.
Okay.
And they completely rebuilt it from ground up, including a new key value store that's coming out soon, entirely in Rust for performance reasons mostly.
Now this is kind of interesting to me too, because you think about a language like Go, you think about a language like Rust, and then the big like high profile problems that they were solving around running asynchronous work, right? And I mean, you had Node.js kind of proving to the world, hey, there's really a lot of room for asynchronous programming. There's really a lot of room for event loop driven programming, and then that would evolve, some might say, into languages like Go and Rust. How does that affect the decision to make a product that is actually more focused on transactional, and then I would wager synchronous patterns?
Well, it's about consistency, and if you're in a multi-clustered environment, or if you're on an IoT environment, SurrealDB can be deployed in both those situations. So the reality is, even though it's asynchronous, you have to be consistent eventually, and the quicker you can get to consistency, then you can say we're an ACID compliant database that doesn't take 20 minutes to become consistent with a transaction. It'll be milliseconds, and I think that's what we're solving for mostly.
That's super interesting. Okay, so you're taking advantage of the asynchronous nature of the language to reach eventual consistency, but the transactions that are helping you reach eventual consistency are individually asynchronous.
Yeah,
Awesome.
as soon as you get to a distributed environment, everything has to happen and be committed at a certain timestamp. And if you're dealing with a language that does that well, you're going to do that much better than having to, reinvent the wheel. Right?
Yeah. So maybe zoom into that a little bit too. And how has that experience been? I know that you're obviously there are multiple developers that are working on this project, but in interacting with them, I mean, what do they say about the choice of Rust for the product? Has it been generally positively received?
So this is where I don't want to sound like an idiot because I'm not a Rust developer. What I will say is I've been amazingly impressed. I mean, right now the size of the team is about 20 devs, 20 engineers, and a lot of them are operating as individual contributors, which is normal and the fact that they're shipping code as well as having in an open source community as well. I've been very impressed. Now, whether that's because of Rust as a choice, because a lot of Rust community is strong, and by the way, check out on Git our open source solution here. You can download the product and contribute eventually. But yeah, I would imagine Rust is probably part of that story fundamentally.
That's a lot of what we're here. I mean, we're investigating a lot with the Rust Foundation too, just because it matches a lot of our values, treating the developer as sort of a first-class citizen and investing as much as possible in the developer experience and reducing kind of toil for that developer. So interesting. That's good. So let's close things out a little bit. You're here at All Things Open. You're here to obviously to promote SurrealDB, but you're here to learn as well.
Yeah.
What are you hoping to take away from the show? You mentioned in the pre-show that this was your first All Things Open. What are you hoping to take away?
Well, I'm honestly getting more involved in the open community to figure out, obviously open source software is an incredible good for society at large. But, a lot of this ecosystem is also about how to make sure it's sustainable in terms of like making sure that developers are well compensated and you can continue to build. So I'm here to learn a lot more about that as well. And also just a lot of cool products, just walking around. It's about swag, but really it's about learning a lot from everybody making cool stuff.
That's great. I really look forward to this show every year too. Been involved for a while. So listen, Alessandro, how can we find you? How can people find you? Do you want to be found on the internet? How can we reach
I'm
out?
gonna go hide under my rock now, but when I come back out, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find SurrealDB on LinkedIn, on X. I wanted to say Twitter, but I didn't. All the good
hard.
stuff.
None of us. Yeah.
And please check out our project on Git and download the thing, play with it. It can be installed on a laptop. It doesn't have to be on a monster thing. It's a lot of fun to play with. UX is great. Give it a whirl.
Great. And then one last thing to close this out. What's your productivity hack? What do you want to let the audience know? What helps keep you productive? Could be big, could be little, could be anything.
I will go on a more philosophical channel. When I run engineering teams or when I run product teams or whatever, I love to come into an existing org and try to educate people on the notion of velocity in an agile team, because velocity is something you measure, you don't improve, and just to get that over the line, it's you improve outcomes, you don't improve velocity. Let's just get that straight. And so getting people to really understand what this means as an org is usually surprising how few people understand that.
That's sage advice, and I think that's so much of the reason that Agile is so heavily abused, is often that sort of misunderstanding. I feel like that could be a whole other topic for us, so hopefully we'll get a chance to maybe follow that thread, maybe in a remote follow-up or something like that. But Alessandro, really great talking with you, and enjoy the rest of the show. And great to